Welcome to the second video in my series on how to study the Bible. The first video was designed to be an introduction to the topic, giving you basic rules and techniques to enable you to start your journey into Bible study. The rest of this series will look in more depth into some of the Bible study techniques that we can use when trying to interpret and learn from God's Word. In this video, we'll look at words and word study. If you were to watch my series on Bibleology, you would see that the very words used in the Bible are inspired. Jesus himself even uses the tense of a word to show a deep theological principle in Matthew chapter 22 and verse 32. And so the Christian, when studying their Bible, should be willing to look carefully at the words used. Our issue is that we, in the main, don't speak the original languages. And so there are times where we'll have to dig a little deeper to understand the full meaning of a word or phrase. If you're of the old school and you love having a physical book in your hand, there are 3 books I would recommend to get you started. First, Strong's Concordance. Second, Thayer's Greek-English Lexicon of the New Testament. And third, Genesis's Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament Scriptures. You could add to that Vine's Dictionary of the New Testament Words and W.E. Bullinger's Critical Lexicon. And you'll have the ability to understand enough of the words used in the Bible to have a good understanding of the passages you seek to study. If, like me, you're too lazy or too mobile to be looking up thick volumes, do not despair. Now we have access to electronic aids to Bible study. There is the Mantis Bible app, the Olive Tree Bible app, and others like them. There's also Logos Bible software and Blue Letter Bible, which will have resources either free or to purchase that enable you to carry with you multiple aids, which are searchable in order to make Bible study more streamlined. My Olive Tree Bible app has a version of the Bible with Strong's Concordance built into it. All I have to do is click on the word I want to know more about, and it gives me the word in its original language, a definition of it, and where else in the Bible the same word is used. What would have been hours of study is right there for quick reference. Am I cheating, or am I being more efficient with my Bible study time? We could, for example, open our Bibles to John chapter 21. We would find there Jesus talking to Peter after his resurrection and Peter's denials of Jesus. Jesus asks Peter, "Do you love me?" The word he used there would be agape. However, Peter replied and used a different word for love. He used the word phileo. We could look up these definitions and see that the two words mean slightly different things. Look up where else they are used to see if there's an additional meaning that we can learn from them. Beyond the study of a word in the passage, we could also do a survey of a word across the whole of the Bible. We could, for example, study sin in the Bible. We could simply read through the Bible, and every time we see the word sin, we make a note of it. There are, of course, other words in the English translations that are used in connection to the concept of wrongdoing. Words like iniquity, wickedness, evil, unrighteousness, etc. We tend to use these words interchangeably, but I'm not sure that that is wise. And certainly in the original languages, there were different words used. They each had their own subtle meanings. And you can learn a little more about what the passage is trying to say by understanding them. So let's look at some of them. Chatta. This Old Testament word means to miss the mark. It is used in Judges chapter 20, verse 16, about the Benjamites, who could sling their stones at a hair's breadth and not miss. They did not chatter. So to sin is to miss the mark. God has set a moral target, and we have failed to aim true. We have missed the target set. This does not always carry with it the intentional implication. Although when the word is used of Cain's man-made religion, there is certainly a deliberate change from what God had required of him. The word is often used of the kings of Israel after the split into Israel and Judah. It says of them that they made Israel to sin, to chatter. Next, we could look at the word asham, which means to trespass. This has the inference that it was done without knowledge or by mistake. It is often used with the Levitical trespass offering. Note here that the fact that it was done in ignorance does not excuse the guilty party. As soon as the individual knew that they had broken a commandment, they had to make amends. If we were to read the life of King David, we would see that he wanted to number the children of Israel for no other reason than his own pride. Joab warned him that he would make the children of Israel trespass. David did it anyway, and the terrible consequences then followed. When David repented, he used chatter instead of asham. He said, "I have sinned greatly." To have a right understanding of sin, we need to understand that even the wrongs we have done in ignorance had to be paid for by Christ on the cross. Next, we can look at the word aven. This word is often translated iniquity. David used the word when repenting for his counting of the children of Israel. He said, "I have sinned, chatter, greatly, because I have done this thing. But now I beseech thee, do away with the iniquity," and here's our word, aven, "of thy servant." The word he uses has a suggestion of perverseness with it. It is often used in connection with idolatry. In 1 Kings chapter 12, verse 28, King Jeroboam set up a false religion to lead away the northern kingdom from God. He had two shrines, one at Bethel, which means the house of God. Hosea, he changed the name to Beth Haven, the house of iniquity. When we read this word in the Old Testament, we need to think less of a specific breach of God's law, but rather a pouring out of man's fallen nature in bad behavior. The old question arises, are we sinners because we sin, or do we sin because we are sinners? The word aven comes from the word which means to pant, to exert oneself in vain. This is the way of man, to toil, to strive for naught, so different from building into God's perfect plan. The next word we'll look at is the word avon, not the people that make skin so soft. No, in the Old Testament, the word avon is often translated iniquity. It means to be crooked or bent. It describes the wrongness of mankind. It tells us of what we are by nature, our natural perverseness. This is one of the words David used in his actions with Bathsheba and her husband. he called his actions perverse, high-handed rebellion, and missing the mark. The next word for sin we'll look at is amal. The word is the word for trouble, toil, or labor. It speaks of the burden of sin. It speaks to the trouble that sin caused in a person's life. It is the word King Solomon uses in Ecclesiastes when he says, I have hated all my labor, which I had undertaken under the sun, in chapter 2, verse 18. Solomon, when reaching the end of his life, realized that he'd been living for the wrong things. All the great and glorious things that Solomon had achieved were sin in his eyes. Now that he was reaching the end of his life, is that what we think when we are old and grey? When it is too late to change our path? Next, we will look at aval. This is the word for unjust, the unfair, deceitful, and unrighteous nature of sin. In Proverbs chapter 29, verse 27, it says, and the unjust, aval, man, is an abomination to the Lord. Do we cheat, lie, or deceive those around us? Even that little white lie to get ourselves out of a tight situation. Moses used the word when talking about the judges of Israel. You shall do no unrighteousness in judgment. Leviticus chapter 19, verse 35. Does our justice system have preferential treatment for some over others? That would make those judges, prosecutors, and police officers sinners. The word abar means to go beyond. This is often translated as transgression. When David used the word in Psalm 17, verse 3, he used it to speak of running away of his words. He said, I am purposed that my mouth shall not transgress. David was determined he was going to keep his tongue in check. We will have to, after all, give account for every idle word. Now that is something to think on, is it not? Now we'll look at the word ra'ah. This is the word for wickedness or injurious. It speaks of damaging what is good. It can be used to describe corruption, lewdness, and depravity. We find this word commonly in the Psalms. The word is sometimes translated to naughty, which nowadays is a ridiculous rendering. We think of children being naughty, or going a few miles over the speed limit on the motorway. But that's not what the word means. It is used in Jeremiah chapter 24, verse 2 to refer to a basket of very bad figs. The idea behind this is that they are rotten to the core. And that is the idea behind ra'ah, rotten to the core. Are you getting the seriousness of the concept? Are we? Is our church? Is our nation rotten to the core? Then we are ra'ah. Next, we can look at the word pasha. This is about rebellion or revolt. This is the rebellion against lawful authority, which finds its source in God. This is the other word that David uses when describing his sin with Bathsheba and the following murder of her husband. This is the rebellion that David saw in his own actions. All legitimate authority is there by God, and so a rebellion against it is a rebellion against God. The next word we will look at is shagag. This word is used when we think of the sin of rashness, often from the result of being deceived. This is the sort of word you would use if the individual was in high emotions or under the influence of alcohol or narcotics. The word is used in Numbers chapter 15, verse 28, where it says, "And the priest shall make atonement before the Lord for the person who makes a mistake when he sins unintentionally, to make an atonement for him, and he shall be forgiven." What is translated here as makes a mistake is translated in the King James as sins unintentionally. But you'll note that the mistake is still a sin that requires an atonement to be made for it. Ma'al is the next word we'll look at. It has the idea of treachery, of unfaithfulness. You might use this word when somebody breaks a contract or when they're in breach of trust. This word is often used of the children of Israel when they broke God's covenant. It is the word used of unfaithfulness in marriage. You can see how God feels about us when we sin against him. Imagine how you would feel if your spouse was to be unfaithful to you. That is how God feels when we break his laws. We are treacherous. The next word we'll examine is rasha. That is the word for wickedness. It is the outpouring of the fact that we are fallen humans. It is the word that Isaiah uses in his prophecy of Christ and his death. He says, "And he will be made, appointed, his grave with the wicked." They sought to add his final level of humiliation for God incarnate. But we know that, as prophesied, that he was with the rich in his death. The Jews wanted him to be buried with criminals, but God saw to it that he was laid in a new tomb. 12 words then, used in the Old Testament to give us a better understanding of the shades, styles, and severity of sin. Of course, that just covers the Old Testament. There are even more words used in the Greek New Testament, but I'll leave that to you. So in this video, we have studied a single concept in 12 Hebrew words. There are many more words that can be studied, and it is a valuable use of your Bible study time. There will be another 2 videos in this series. They'll look at figures of speech, cultural context, allegories, and symbols, the law of context, structure, the obscurity rule, typology, parables, law of mentions, numbers, and names. So thanks for watching.